Welcome to Roots Rishte, a podcast focused on all things South Asian mental health.
We are your co-hosts, two psychologists in the field who are also work besties, wanting to invite you to join us as we speak about patterns and dynamics we see in our clinical work.
We want to have the serious conversations, the topics which are taboo and whispered about, but we also want to celebrate the joys and wins that we experience on a daily basis.
There will be practical applications we hope you can implement in your day-to-day life, which is not like your typical auntie's advice. And just a quick disclaimer, this podcast is for educational purposes only. It does not constitute as a therapeutic relationship or therapeutic advice. Should you want to work with us, please reach out. Hi, I'm Dr. Ambreen Basria. I'm a clinical and counseling psychologist and founder of Teston Psychological Services.
And I'm Dr. Simrat Kaur Padda, also a clinical and counseling psychologist and the founder of Room to Grow Psychological Services. Hi, Ambreen.
Hi, Simrat. How are you?
Good. We have an important episode today, and it's an important subject. It's an important topic. Enmeshment. It's a big topic. It's a dynamic that's really prevalent. I see a lot of it in my work. I'm sure you probably see a lot of it in your work as well with the clients.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, just to kind of understand it a little bit better, right? Like, what is enmeshment? I remember when I first learned about the term enmeshment, I was in my family therapy class at Loma Linda University doing my master's. And it was just talking about this concept that Murray Bowen came up with, which is called differentiation of self. And in that, the topic of enmeshment comes up. And enmeshment is this concept of like personal boundaries being completely blurred, right? You're almost like emotionally fused with other people in your life, right? There's no individualization. There's no like autonomy of sorts, right? Like emotional autonomy, right?
Yeah. The idea of over-involvement, right? It's when different family members are overly involved in one another's life. And I mean, culturally and in family dynamics, there is an integration, obviously, right? There is sort of like an integration between family members, but it's the over-involvement and then also sort of the emotional ramifications that comes with that.
Yeah. Like, how many of you have actually felt guilt when you have to say no to a family member? Or when you have to say no to your mom and dad, or you have to say that you want to do something else instead of what everyone else wants to do.
Yeah. And I like some of these statements, right? You always listen to your elders. Family comes first. What else comes to mind? Like, they're just such common sort of like sentiments that.
I also think that there's this concept around like enmeshment that, I think it's helpful to kind of look at it from a difference of closeness versus collectivism, right?
Like that.
Closeness can indicate that you have emotional independence, right? Closeness can indicate that you have safety. But collectivism can sometimes mean that it's about the collective good. It's about what everybody else wants. And it's like, that is a vote that we go with. Right?
Yeah. And once again, I think the biggest component to this, or one of the bigger components to this, is the idea that it does result in a sense of pressure or guilt or shame or expectations or just really sort of maladaptive elements into a person's life and the repeated pattern of behaviors, right? And so we see enmeshment start to play out in other relationships.
Absolutely. We see this now in family dynamics, right? So this is your nuclear family that you're with, your mom, your dad, all of that. But let's not forget that they might have enmeshment patterns with their own nuclear families, which then now you're kind of taking this down to your nuclear family. So maybe your romantic relationships, maybe your friendships, maybe other areas of your life now, you're going to see enmeshment pop up in different ways.
Yeah. And parenting, right? It could also pop up in like how a person
as you become
parents.
A parent.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the idea of kind of growing up feeling responsible for other people's happiness, right? And then kind of the pressure that puts on a person to maybe not live aligned to their values or what feels important to them because they're so concerned or feel so responsible about making sure that everybody around them is okay.
And we learn from a very young age, actually, that our desires, our wants, our needs are not as important as the values of those around us, right? Yeah. So, we've heard common phrases like, don't disrespect your elders, don't talk back, what will people say? How will so and so react to you doing this major or you doing that, right?
Yeah. And it's the idea that like trust and love, it's a two-way street,
Yeah.
right? And so like there's a reciprocal energy that's required. So even the idea of like not just respecting your elders, by all means, like the respect for elders is it's so important culturally in our communities and family dynamics, but it is something that needs to be earned, right?
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah.
Right? Like
And, I often like think about it this way too, like we blur the lines quite a bit around the concepts of love and control. I love you. That's why I'm telling you this for your own good, right? And we hear a lot of this kind of messaging and a lot of this kind of phrasing. But what we don't realize is that actually is a translation of like, yes, you can love somebody, but it also is now blurring the lines of control.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. So how would you differentiate between love and control?
I think love comes with safety. Love comes with safety to allow you to explore your emotional independence. It allows you to develop emotional autonomy. It allows you to be to express your own thoughts and desires in a world of safety that can accept if you make a mistake, that it's not a mark on the other person.
Would it be fair to say that love versus control, love is almost unconditional, control is conditional? So control is the idea of like, like you are good enough if you do this, you are good enough when you do this. It's not you as a person, as an entity, while love has a little bit more acceptance and unconditional sort of regard to it.
Absolutely. Right? Like love allows you for that space, for that development, right? Whereas I think control wants to control your experiences. But, and I think I want to make this clear too. It's not with this idea that the control is coming from a place of a lack of love, right? Like control is really coming from a place of anxiety, right? Because there may be some level of anxiety around you having an experience or falling down and then, the other person, for example, not being able to help you back up or not being able to, fix a situation for you, right? So I think we want to understand this too, that the control piece is, yes, it's unhealthy, but it's not being driven from a place of like a lack of love.
Yeah. And it might also be because the stakes almost feel higher, right? And so if we're thinking of like parents, a generation that immigrated to a different country and they survival, right? Like they set up a life and they kind of built a life for their children and now they want the best for their children. But then once again, it's a difference between is it coming from a loving perspective? Is it coming more from a control perspective?
Right.
Yeah. I like that though. Yeah. Because once again, I think it's important not to be villainizing these dynamics, but just recognizing the patterns that fuel them.
And maybe even just like understanding where these dynamics are coming from, right? Like it's not coming from a place of like, they don't love you. It's coming from a place of like, they've had their experiences. Their experiences have taught them something, but it's also taught them the anxiety around falling, failing, and not wanting those experiences for you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. How do we see enmeshment culturally? Like how, from a cultural context, how does it really sort of pop up in clients that you see?
I think, for example, one great example of this, and we see this commonly, right? Like it's a daughter that can't say no to things that her parents might want, right? So this could be a married daughter with children. You would imagine emotional autonomy, independent life, all of those things. But if her parents are asking her to do something, maybe it's to kind of share resources, time. Oh, you don't come see me enough. You don't come call me enough, oh, so-and-so's daughter does this for them. How come you don't do this for us, right? It's that daughter that struggles to say no and say, I don't have the capacity to do this, or I cannot do this, or I need to be able to do this way, right? So it's really what kind of comes up here in enmeshment is the emotional autonomy is compromised.
Yeah. And I like how you just kind of worded that because the key part of it is that the daughter in the situation is lacking the capacity or the real sort of ability to do this, but the expectation and the guilt associated with sort of this family pattern is so high that she feels like she has to at the cost of whatever it may be, her own mental health, her own physical health, her own time with her family. So yeah. So once again, it's not that she doesn't, it's a capacity part, right?
Yes, capacity
it's
part.
expected.
And I think it can go a little bit further than that too,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like with the daughter that, for example, cannot say no, right? Like it can also be now that this is like blurring the lines of her relationship with her husband, right?
Yeah.
So it could be that the parents are not okay with the husband, or they don't like what this person is doing, or et cetera, right? And so now they're interfering and saying like, oh, don't let him do this, or why are we doing this or that or whatever, right? It's actually like the insertion into the couple dynamic as
Yeah.
well. And that can be a real reflection of enmeshment as well, because we're now not able to kind of separate out that this is my dynamic and this
Mm-hmm.
is our dynamic, right?
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because that's something I see a lot in the couples that I work with, right? And it just so happens in a lot of the couples that I work with, it's the other way around. So it's the son who really struggles with sort of the enmeshment piece, because the expectations are so high in terms of his role in the family, particularly if it's the eldest son. And there's a sense of responsibility for his parents.
Mhm.
And then if there's some sort of conflict or disagreement, or even just some sort of tension between wife and parents, really kind of gets stuck in the middle.
Right.
The husband, the son does, right?
Yeah.
And kind of trying to navigate that. But it's difficult when there is that enmeshment sort of. And once again, investment means over involvement, right? It means those really high expectations. That can be a real challenging sort of element to navigate.
And to kind of expand on that too, right? Like the son that becomes like the emotional partner of sorts, right? Like there's this whole piece of this that kind of
Mhm.
happens as well, where sometimes there's a great deal of conflict between mom and dad,
Yeah.
and maybe they have had unresolved trauma, maybe they've had unresolved dynamic, maybe an arranged marriage that has gone wrong, right?
Mhm.
And because society has dictated that, hey, you guys need to stay together, there's this almost this play out that happens of like the son, the eldest son, having to fulfill this emotional role for another parent,
Yeah.
right? And then now, how is the son supposed to navigate the emotional investment that it's taking to be the emotional partner here
Mhm.
for maybe a parent, but now also being an emotional partner that's available to their partner as well?
Yeah, and another version of that is if a father passes away, for
Yeah.
example, and then the son almost becomes like the surrogate sort of husband slash father slash son, and then how convoluted sort of that role becomes
Yeah. Yeah.
for a person. Yeah.
And I think something that I want to make sure that we touch on now, but we'll touch on a little bit more
Hmm.
later, is that, I think a lot of us can probably be listening to this going, okay, I see that the enmeshment is happening, but now what?
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's important to say that, we don't need to disrespect the dynamics and the culture of what's taking place, or the
Hmm.
responsibilities of what we feel taking place. But I think we need to be able to understand how we personally navigate these situations,
Yeah.
right? Because that might look different for everyone.
Yeah. And I think it becomes so normalized kind of within different family dynamics, culturally, can become very normalized. But it's to be able to acknowledge if there are maladaptive elements to it. And if it is impacting sort of a person's own sense of being and autonomy. Once again, not full individualization from the family unit, but even just kind of living aligned to their values, if it's impacting their ability to be in relationships, if it's impacting marriages or parenting. And so it's the idea of acknowledging, like you said, labeling kind of the maladaptive element to it as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think there are other examples that we can talk about too that I think
Hmm.
are just so important to highlight as well,
Yeah.
right? Like oftentimes we'll see that someone may get into school really
Hmm.
far away,
Hmm.
but it's an amazing school and it's an amazing opportunity for them. Or maybe they've gotten a career opportunity that is also requires them to move away, or maybe they have a partner that requires them to move away, right? Like a lot of these things where now we suddenly have to move away from family dynamic.
Hmm.
This can be another piece that now comes back in. And like sometimes families go, in mesh families, for example, will go, oh no, it's going to destroy me if you leave, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to be gutted.
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and so the expectation once again is that you kind of have to put your own sort of maybe, not dreams, maybe dreams, but goals, plans on hold to appease the needs of other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. but those needs may never actually be like fully appeased. Like that's the tricky part too, right? Like this is a dynamic that has a potential of going on forever, like
Forever.
constantly. And that's the pattern, right? It's not any specific situation, it's the pattern of behavior that's constantly getting.
And that's exactly it. You can accept a job locally, you can accept the school locally, but you're still going to have this pattern play out throughout your life, right?
Yeah.
And it actually is one of those things in the family system that we learn becomes harder to break as time goes on, right? So we talk about this in family systems, like every part of the family knows what to do. So sibling dynamics is a perfect example of this, right? Like, I always joke about this with me and my sister. She knows exactly what button to push to get me hot. Like I'm ready. I'm like steaming, like, like smoke is coming out of my ears type of steaming, right? And then 2 seconds later, she could be like, you want to go get like ice cream or something?
Yeah.
And it's totally fine, right? And she would do that all the time. Like she would take my pants. Like I'd lay out my clothes the night before and they'd be gone the next morning. It would get me so upset, right? But I talk about this dynamic because as siblings, you know exactly what button to push to kind of make a reaction happen, right? Same thing in a family system. They know exactly how every person is going to react in a family, right? So now when you try and change a family system, what happens is it causes a little bit of chaos, right? And what people do is they escalate in behavior. So when we don't kind of address it head on, people escalate in behavior, right? And then it gets harder. Like they amp up, right? And so then it becomes even harder for you to set a boundary because they're like, no, we know that you know that you have to do this piece, right? We know that you're going to comply. So just comply. So we're going to escalate, right?
Yeah.
But what happens is that if you are actually firm about making the change, the escalation, like if you're working with a professional, like I have to be able to tolerate this. I need to be able to have my tools to manage the escalations here, right?
Yeah.
But at some point, that clicks into place and goes, oh, okay.
This is the new norm?
Yeah.
Yeah, I talk about that with my clients all the time, right? So when we change how we are, there's resistance that comes, right? Or for people who have never been able to say no, when they start to say no and kind of set some of these parameters around them that feel really important, there's resistance that can come back because, like you said, now it's disrupting the system. And the system was working, adaptive or maladaptive, the system was working. And now there's a disruption. But I also kind of tell them that the resistance peaks right at the beginning, but it does eventually plateau, or that's the hope, right? And so it's about riding out sort of the distress, like through the distress tolerance, building your distress tolerance so you can ride out that resistance.
Yeah.
But the liberation with saying no can also be so empowering and so important.
Yeah. It can be life-changing. Right?
Yeah. And so with enmeshment, kind of like what do you do about it, right? So a person who is able to acknowledge that, hey, there's these patterns that they're not really serving me. They're probably not serving the family dynamic either. Just because it's the way it is, that doesn't mean that it's serving everybody.
It's keeping the family dynamic stagnant. It doesn't
Exactly.
allow anybody to grow, and it doesn't allow for space to exist for anyone or anything else to come in, right? And so I often talk about this too, that, before you even kind of go around, start setting all these boundaries and stuff like that, you have to really kind of look deeply in yourself and like acknowledge what you need, right? Like acknowledge where these like boundaries or these enmeshment areas are not working for you, right?
Yeah.
Because if you kind of go out there trying to like fight all these like enmeshment patterns, guess what? It's going to feel like you're fighting a losing battle because everything is going to be a battle, right?
Yeah.
So really take the time to look deeply within yourself, identify it, label it, identify what your values are in relation to these patterns, right? Because by being able to do that, when you need to speak up, you're speaking up for what you actually really need.
Yeah. And also being able to identify kind of what your role is in enabling these patterns to continue, right? And so when we start to sort of shift some of these patterns, the messaging that probably will go the best, as opposed to kind of like, I'm changing everything, forget this, screw this, like I'm different, is I love you, but I need some space, right? I love you, but this feels important for me. And so that's kind of bridging the two. You are acknowledging the importance of family, but you are also acknowledging kind of your own sort of sense of self.
And sometimes I think it's really important to also say that we need to be able to allow people space to process their own emotions. You know, it can get really uncomfortable when somebody is expressing an emotion that we are not happy with or it does not align with our values, right? And so sometimes you might see that when you're setting a boundary, even by saying something like, I love you and I need space, it brings about this feeling of like discomfort that I have to allow somebody else to sit with their emotions and I'm disappointing them or I'm hurting them and I feel bad about it. But it's also about sitting with the recognition that you have to own your piece and they have to own their piece.
Yeah.
That's the individualization, right? Like that's the differentiation of self, right? Like that we talk about with Murray Bowen. It's like the differentiation of self is being able to be emotionally autonomous but still emotionally close.
Yeah. And recognizing that there is a purpose to the discomfort, right? So the discomfort isn't just for the sake of discomfort, like where you're not trying to kind of like, have this feeling, but there's a purpose to that. And that is to shift behaviors to feel a little bit more aligned. Yeah. And sometimes it like not becomes forced, but sometimes it kind of like hits a person in the face, right? So once again, the couples work that I do, a lot of times people don't recognize this pattern that they're in. And then a spouse comes into the dynamic or a partner comes into the dynamic and they look around and they're like, whoa, there are some things going on in here that I am not okay with. And then you are kind of like, you're forced to sort of see it. And there can be resistance to that because you're kind of like living life and you're totally like, you think you're fine, you think everything's fine. And then suddenly this other person comes and they disrupt the dynamic. Right. And so it's like sometimes, so that's part of the discomfort as well is trying to navigate that like there's like, I'm being told that there's this huge issue, but there's no issue. But then you do the self-reflection, right? You do the work and you kind of figure out why this other person is sort of seeing things that maybe you were seeing differently.
And that's exactly what we wanted to go back to too, right? Is like recognizing like, for example, you might have a value around a joint family dynamic. You might have a value around like, being able to exist in a joint family dynamic, right? Like we know this culturally, that's a huge piece. That's a huge component, right? But what does this entail, right? Like how do we kind of navigate the differentiation of self and sometimes recognizing that others around us may not be willing to be unenmeshed in some ways, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to then sit with the fact that, okay, like we have to let everybody else figure out everyone else. How do I differentiate now in this dynamic?
Yes. Yeah. In this dynamic, I think that that's so important, right? Because the goal is not a complete separation from dynamic, from family, from values. It's just to build that self-awareness, to recognize these patterns and to kind of start to pivot in a way that just feels maybe a little bit more aligned or
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's where kind of having these conversations is so important. And that's where, for some clients, having a clinician, for example, that has a South Asian background or has at least an understanding of the dynamics it feels really important as well. Because there's nuances that sometimes you just kind of have to have experienced yourself in order to understand or
Absolutely. And I tell this to clients all the time too, right? Like I can give some sort of like an idea of what this might look like, but you may have to go back and think about it and think about how is this going to look different for you, right? I might tell you to do X, Y, and Z, but A, B, and C is more effective for you. Right?
Yeah. I think kind of the main points is the idea that enmeshment is about the over involvement. And it's about the maladaptive elements of the shame and the guilt and the high expectations and the living kind of misaligned to your own values and sense of self. Right? I think to some degree there is always going to be an integration in family dynamics. I think that's what family is, right? We kind of work as a system. But once again, enmeshment is different from that because of these other elements.
Exactly. And it's not a betrayal to express your own needs and desires and your peace, right? I think it's important. And I think it's important that the message that comes across is that your peace can be achieved while also considering the needs of others, right?
Yeah.
It's a give and take, but it's uncomfortable.
Yes. And it's not control. It's love, not control. I think that's important.
And so the not your auntie's advice, right,
Mm-hmm.
is not do what your family or your parents or people around you just say, right? Like think about your values. Think about what your values are, what is important to you, and really kind of reflect on where those needs of differentiation for you exist.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And being able to understand, being able to recognize if there's a misalignment and how you recognize that, right? And what that feels like. And yeah.
And it's okay to rock the boat if it's important to you, but it's also important to make sure that you're prepared.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And rocking the boat doesn't necessarily have to be this massive disruption.
Yeah.
It can be very small, significant, impactful pivots.
Ripples in the ocean, right?
Ripples in the ocean. Yeah. This is such an important sort of dynamic that we see again and again in the work that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for joining us today. That was Roots Rishte podcast.